Welcome to Aiken This Week. I'm Glenn Parker. Our guests this week are Interim Planning Director Tommy Paradise and our Engineering and Public Works Director George Grin. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tommy, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about the planning department and overall what your responsibilities are.
Well, first thing about the planning department is we're really not the decision makers on a lot of decisions. Our job's to make sure that the policy makers, the people that do make the decisions, the different boards, commissions, and council has the information that they need so they can make a knowledgeable decision on the issues that's before them. But we really look at the long-range planning issues that the city may be affected by, keeping our development and review process. We try to keep that responsive and streamlined. You know, we get comments back that we're not user-friendly from time to time, but we really do strive to keep that going and get it on through the process. And then we also help with the development and we're responsible for the enforcement of the regulations, the land development regulations and the zoning ordinance. And we also have 3 commissions that we provide staff support for. The Planning Commission, the Design Review Board, and the Board of Zoning Appeals. And there again, just like these are the policy and decision makers, we strive to give them adequate information so they can make quality decisions.
Okay.
And just some other things we do is we review the site plans for new projects. Whenever a project comes to town, we're one of the first stops, make sure it fits the zoning. We're the drop-off for the developer so that we farm it out to engineering for their review process and public safety. And the subdivision plans, you know, that we're the drop-off for those. We've got land development regulations that regulates how subdivisions are built, the size of the lots, the availability of water, sewer service, the streets, the width of the streets, how wide a cul-de-sac has to be, dead-end road lengths so that you don't go down a long dead-end road and have no place to turn around. We also review and issue the sign permits. That's one of our hot button issues. Doing the sign reviews. We enforce the zoning ordinance and the land development regulations and also the utility agreements. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is that the city of Aiken provides water and sewer service outside the corporate limits. And when you're developing outside of the corporate limits and we're providing you that water and or sewer service, there's certain city requirements that we want you to comply with. Our sign regulations, our landscape regulations, those type issues, and you also do an annexation agreement if you're not contiguous to the city. If you are contiguous, then we want you to annex. But we want you to be in a position so that when the city grows and gets to you, and we annex you into the city, that you fit in with the city. And one of the recent things that we did is within the last year, the city has revised the utility policy. And one of the big changes there is just because if you purchase a piece of property out in the county and it has water and or sewer service to it, and you change that use, say it's a single family residential house and you're going to put a business in it, our policy now says you need to come to us and get a utility agreement for that commercial use. So that's been a big change. And then like I said, we're the central drop-off point for the developers.
Okay. That's a lot. And planning is basically a small department, and your department's also, over the last few months, you've undergone a lot of change with staff. Several folks have retired, some have moved on to other agencies, but you've brought in some good people, and I know you're excited to have those folks on board. Tell us about those people and what their responsibilities are.
Well, let me first mention the ones that's left. Mr. Evans, he was the planning director for 28 years. He retired July of last year. And then Sandra Korbelick, she was a senior planner. She retired in November, and I forget how many years. She had close to 20 years. And then you had Susan French with 15 years. She did the historic preservation. She recently retired. So we've lost a lot of the institutional history that the department had. But since then, we've made 2 hires. They're fairly recent, and you know, they've got to get used to the system, get accustomed to how we do things, and familiar with our ordinances and stuff. But one is Maria Moultrie. She's an Aiken native, and she works with the Planning Commission issue and does our landscape site plan review, subdivision planning, and she has a master's degree in landscape architecture from the University of Florida. And she's also has previous experience with the Emergency Preparedness Division of the state of Maryland, doing hazard mitigation planning, and also was a subdivision planner for the Aiken County. And then she served a time with the Augusta-Richmond County Planning Department as a transportation planner. And she's also been in private practice. And of course, you know, the 2008 downturn didn't help people in private practice and planning. But so she brings a lot of knowledge and experience to the department. And then the other individual is Ron Hanna. He is a recent graduate from the College of Charleston. He's a James Island native, so he's down from the Charleston area. And he does staff support for the Board of Zoning Appeals and also the Historic Preservation Commission. And this is his first public sector job. He has a master's degree, well, his undergraduate degree from College of Charleston is in political science, and he has a master's degree in public administration with a graduate certificate in urban planning and development. So he's new, he's excited, and we're looking forward to him having a long future with the city. And then of course we've got 2 other staff members with us that, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention them. And one is Mary Ann Hill. She's just the anchor. She is the central go-to person in any organization you have, one of those people that is just there and knows that you can go to, the public can go to, but she's kind of under the radar, but we'd be lost without her. And then there's Paula Jones. And Paula, she's our part-time secretary up front, and she's just a bright, shining face when you come in. She's always bubbly and happy and does everything she can to help the public and us. So we'd really be lost without the 2 of them up there.
I know in my little time that you guys allowed me to have an office up there, those 2 ladies helped me out a lot. Simple things like, you know, making certain copies and doing those kind of things. They were a real blessing to me. You mentioned the different councils and committees that the group works for. Share with us a little bit about those folks and the different committees and commissions that the planning department works with, and how you provide staff support for them.
Sure, but before I do that, I just wanted to mention something about our volunteers, the people that serve on these boards and commissions, that a lot of the public don't realize. In fact, I was astounded one time when I had a member of the public ask me how much they got paid. And these are volunteers. They don't get paid a dime. They do it out of a dedication to the community. And they get put in a position where they have to make some very difficult and hard decisions. And I have seen them do the research and really study and struggle over issues before they made those decisions. And I've also seen them lose friends, and some that's in private business, lose customers over decisions that they've made serving on these boards and commissions. And I think that's something that a lot of times we take for granted. and we need to recognize the dedication and the value that these members bring to the boards, because they take it serious. It's not a come in the meeting, make a vote, and leave. They research these issues. They visit sites. There's a lot of work that goes into their decision making, and they don't get paid 1 red cent. But anyway, we provide staff support for the Planning Commission, the Design Review Board, and the Board of Zoning Appeals. And the Planning Commission, I see the Planning Commission get a lot of heat from time to time on issues. Planning Commission, for the most part, is a recommending body. The only time that they have the final say is if land development regulations, developing subdivisions, if someone thinks that they want a variance for one of the regulations, that they feel like a variance is something where these are the rules, but in this particular case it doesn't make sense to apply it. They make the final decision there. But other than that, they make recommendations to City Council, and they make recommendations on annexations, rezonings or zonings, city services, the utility services that I was talking about earlier. And then they propose amendments to the zoning ordinance and land development regulations to City Council. And like I said, they also grant variances. The Design Review Board, they're responsible for the overlay districts. We have 2 overlay districts. There's the Old Aiken Overlay District, which includes downtown and part of the Old Aiken section going east, and then the historic districts. And they were formerly known as the Historic Preservation Commission, but they approved the construction, alteration, demolition, and relocation of buildings in these districts. And they also make recommendations to council on properties that may be deemed historic. And then the Board of Zoning Appeals, they do hear applications for special exceptions, variances, and appeal and administrative appeals. And a special exception is this use is allowed in this particular district by special exception, which means it has to have a public hearing and gives the neighbors an opportunity to speak. It's not allowed by right, as we call it. And then the board can hear the neighbors, it can hear the circumstances of this particular operation and make that decision. And a variance, like I said earlier, is these are the rules, but in this particular instance they shouldn't apply. And then an administrative appeal is when the planning director or the zoning official makes a decision and the applicant disagrees with it. That's his first step of appeal, is go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay. Now, and those, we'll be doing a show and upcoming on the website, but all their agendas and I think all the minutes eventually end up on the city's website. So if people want to see discussion that went on, they can go look at the website to get that information.
Correct.
One of the things that people asked me when they heard you were coming on the show, they want to know, what's the hot new restaurant? Ask Tommy what's coming to town. We want to know. Tell us why you can't tell people what's coming to town.
Well, first thing is, I don't count it done until they start moving dirt. So, we hear a lot of people that inquire, but it may not come to fruition. But even before that, there is a certain level of confidentiality. It may affect their land values. It may affect their competition. It may affect a lot of things that may end up in that project not coming. And we want to be user-friendly when it comes to the business community and our citizens. And so it's confidential until we see a site plan. Once they submit that application, well, then they're not in the research and due diligence phase anymore. We've got an application that's public information, and I'm glad to show it to anybody that comes into the office.
Okay. Now, there are some things going on now that you probably can tell us about. What are some of the big issues that are sort of out there right now?
Well, right now, I think the biggest is the building height. And, you know, the council should be looking at that as the next reading, is my understanding. And hopefully they have the information available to them so they can make the correct decision. But the big issue coming up for us in the next year is the comprehensive plan. And we've released the RFP for that. Those are due back to us by the end of the month, end of July, and then we'll review them. But that's going to be the master plan for the city for the next 10 to 20 years. And we hope to have that finished by October 1, 2016. It's a pretty massive overtaking. We're looking at not only the city limits, but how we want to do in our utility district. So when we provide services outside of the city limits, we can say, okay, this is the type of growth we want in this area. And we're going to really need citizens to participate in that process, so hopefully people will keep their ears open for it and come out to the meetings when we have and participate in it.
Okay. Before we talk with George, tell us just briefly how planning and engineering sort of work together.
Well, we work together on a daily basis, but one of the biggest things I want to give a comment about is the GIS. The GIS is located in the engineering department, and they give us the support. They do the zoning maps for us, the updates, and they really do a fine job in keeping us in the loop where we can provide the services.
Sure.
And then we are the central drop-off, and we coordinate. When we get plans, we have to coordinate utilities, where's the sewer lines coming in at versus our landscaping and planting of the trees, subdivision plans, you know, to make sure the trash trucks have enough room to turn around, the fire trucks have enough to turn around. And also George and I are both active with the transportation planning. That's something that's new to me since I've become the interim director. There's just a lot out there going on.
Okay. Now, George, from your perspective as the engineering and utilities director, conversely, how do you work with planning?
Well, basically, it's pretty much like Tommy said. He is providing us with the information when there are developments coming in and there are plans to review. He gathers all that. We respond, we inspect the plans and review them for their compliance with the engineering specifications and standards. If we have questions about codes, we'll work with Tommy and his group to understand them and what's allowed in different areas. But we'll send back the comments to Tommy's planning department, and then they will interact with the developer, and we, through an iterative process, get a plan that the city of Aiken will be, proud to have a development or something new come in. They provide us with the information so that we can update our GIS. We work with them for any, what do you call it? When somebody wants a variance to an ordinance, we'll go out, and they're very good at letting us know about those so that we can check to see if our infrastructure might be affected by a request for a variance, and then we'll give them our feedback so that something doesn't get built on top of a sewer line or a water line or something like that.
Okay. Now, a few years back, your department, engineering and utilities, and another department now in the city, public services, were combined into one called Public Works, a more traditional term everybody's comfortable with and familiar with, I should say. Tell us what caused the change to break those apart and how that's benefiting you now.
Right. I think the main objective was to have more focus on engineering projects, more focus on utilities, and just the amount of work was starting to become very challenging for the director at the time. And so the idea was to split off the public services so that could be focused on more directly. And I think the benefit has been then the allowing of improving utility services, spending more time kind of reviewing our procedures and how we assign our people and allocate our resources. And so it's really kind of a management focus was the reason for the split.
Okay. So your engineering and utilities, tell us a little bit about what the responsibilities of the engineering staff is.
Well, engineering is the technical arm of the city. We help the various departments when they have projects, answer technical, project management issues. We actually will, in some cases, manage the project for them, from completion of the bid document to implementing the contract and overseeing the work. In some cases, we're more of an advisory to that, because it might be a bigger job and it might be handled with a consultant. But typically, engineering will review the new infrastructure needs for the city. Where do we need more water? Where do we need more sewer, etc.? How do we grow when we have new developments, review those plans, those types of things. So anything that's a kind of a technical nature tends to get to the engineers.
Now, I don't want to imply that utilities is non-technical, but it's a whole different game over with the utilities folks. What do they do?
Well, utilities actually makes up quite a few departments. There's the water production department. There's the sanitary sewer, which has lift stations and moves, the wastewater throughout the city. There's stormwater, which is trying to control the rain so that it doesn't cause a lot of problems and flooding in streets and so on. We are responsible for the streets and the sidewalks, and as well as the street lights. So the utilities department basically responds to those needs. We receive call-ins for when people have a water leak, or when they have a backup of sewer, and our people will go out and make appropriate repairs. When every once in a while we have a suggestion for where a sidewalk should be put in, our people will put in the sidewalks. Our street crews actually spend a lot of time helping the sewer and water crews repair what happens after you make a leak repair. The leak may be in a driveway, it may be in a yard, it may be in the street. And so our street crew will do either the concrete or the asphalt repair, and we have a yard crew that comes in and repair the yards. We have actually a new initiative that the utilities is working on, and this is the oil and grease technician. We've recently reorganized so that we could focus an individual to go out to various restaurants where we have oil and grease traps and things of that nature that need to be inspected and kept clean to keep the grease and oil out of our sewer lines. So that's something that we're starting new.
Well, why don't focus on that a minute? I know you guys spend a lot of time going to residential homes also, dealing with grease backups and sewer backups, but let's focus on the grease. What can people do to help cut down on the amount of those backups you have?
The thing that residential citizens can do is, whenever you have a grease, if you let it harden and then throw it in your trash, and it'll go out to the solid waste, that is a better place for it to harden and be disposed of. If it hardens in the sewer line, it's restricting the flow of the sewer going out of the home or in the sewer mains. And so a little bit of grease here, a little bit of grease there, it all adds up, and then before long you have a clog that is literally preventing sewer from flowing as it should. Oils and grease, really kind of the same way. If you collect even the liquid oils, if you'll keep them in a container, then throw them in your solid waste. We are actively, as I just said, going after some of the businesses, and we will be going to restaurants around the city and inspecting their grease traps. All restaurants are required to have grease traps. They're required to maintain them. They're actually required to keep a log and a manifest of who is coming to, a properly licensed contractors coming to remove the oil and grease and dispose of it properly. And we're going to become more active at doing that because really grease is the number one cause for backups in the city.
Okay. You mentioned briefly the water. You guys oversee the water plants, and we used to get most of our water from Shaw's Creek. Now I think we get a good bit of our water from wells around the city. Tell us how that operation works, and where's most of our water coming from?
Sure. Actually, 80 to 85% of all our water comes from wells. And these are some of the aquifers that, if you look at I-20, that's about where the sandhills start, and that's where the aquifers are actually starting. We're blessed to have a good quantity of supply of very high quality water because we're at the very beginning of the whole aquifer water system that the rest of the state, as you go down to the coast, also utilizes. We have 7 wells. We have 3 different water treatment plants, the newest one being the Silver Bluff Water Treatment Plant, where we installed 2 wells. It actually has capacity and could treat an additional capacity of 1 more well, and so we've planned for the future. And right now we can produce about 18.6 million gallons per day of water. Typically this time of year when it's dry and people are watering their lawns, we're in the 14 million gallons per day usage. So before we added the Silver Bluff well, we were having some concerns and problems with low water pressures when everybody was, I guess there's the Monday, Wednesday, Friday mentality of this is when we water, and so from 4 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock in the morning, the city has limited, water tank capacity, and basically it would suck it dry, and then we would be maintaining the supply through active production in the wells. With the Silver Bluff plant, we now have an additional 750,000 gallons of storage plus capacity, so we're in much better shape, and we're well positioned for the future.
So we're not currently under any water restrictions as far as watering our lawns and those kind of things?
No, and the situation, we'd basically look at our production, look at demand, and then we would only implement that if it was absolutely needed. The state DNR, I guess, has a committee that they decide whether we're in drought conditions, and if our capacity started such and the demand was greater that caused our water pressures to drop, then we would make a recommendation to the city manager to put restrictions in, and if it was all agreed to, then that's when we would do it. But I don't see that for the foreseeable future with the addition of our capacity.
Yeah, we've also had a relatively damp spring,
Yes.
so that always helps.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are excited about what's going on in the alley, which is right behind us. Over the next several months, we're going to be changing the face of the alley, but not only what people will see above ground, what's going on below ground is really the crust of what we're trying to do there. Tell us a little bit about that project.
Yes. We're really excited about that project as well. The project really started because the city has had an objective, I guess, for a while to take the overhead wires and put them underground just to beautify the downtown area. And when you start looking at what you have to do in order to achieve that, we would be cutting up the sidewalks, the paving, and patching wouldn't do justice to the alley area in the downtown. So when we started looking at the project, we decided that what we could do then is make the area look better when we finish the project of undergrounding all these wires. Now the wires you're talking about are not just the electrical wires, there's also cable and telephone wires. So you start talking about all the utilities, and then when you start thinking about what's underground and where you're going to put it, there's been a lot of different things put in the ground over the years. There's gas lines, there's water and sewer lines. The water and sewer lines are 50-plus years old. So what we made the decision is that when we're going to dig up the alley, we'll cut the cat's tail off, one time, not an inch at a time. We will take care of all the utilities so that hopefully we will not have to worry about fixing leaks or old sewer lines or old water lines. So what we'll be doing is digging up the alley in phases. We anticipate 3 phases, and we will replace the water, the sewer. We'll put all the utility lines. We've been acquiring and talking with all the business owners and the building owners so that we can get easements so that we can put the lines where they need to go. And our anticipated timeline would be we are going to get bids actually next week, and then we'll look at the result. If they are acceptable, then we would go to council, ask for permission to proceed. And if that's granted, then we would anticipate working the project, like I said, in 3 phases. Probably the first phase would be hopefully completed before Thanksgiving. I say hopefully, I'm hoping that maybe they could do 2 phases between now and Thanksgiving, but that'll be dependent on the contractor selected and the amount of work and how they organize it. So we will not do any construction during the holiday seasons. We've got the Thanksgiving, Christmas, so we'll button everything up so that people won't be there won't be an interference with all the festivities planned for that time. And the same thing in the spring when we have our normal golf and horse season, March, April timeframe. We'll work in between those so that we will not interfere with any of the businesses and the other activities the citizens want to enjoy.
All right, well, good, thank you. Thank you both for being here. I know in my role with the capital projects, both of your departments have been very helpful to me and have helped us move those projects along. So we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
That'll wrap up our show for this week. We'll see you next week.